A Creole language, or simply a Creole, is a stable natural language that has developed from a pidgin. Creoles differ from pidgins because Creoles have been nativized by children as their primary language, with the result that they have features of natural languages that are normally missing from pidgins, which are not anyone's first language. The vocabulary of a Creole language is largely supplied by the parent languages, particularly that of the most dominant group in the social context of the Creole's construction, though there are often clear phonetic and semantic shifts. On the other hand, the grammar often has original features that may differ substantially from those of the parent languages. Overview: A Creole is believed to arise when a pidgin, developed by adults for use as a second language, becomes the native and primary language of their children, a process known as nativization. The pidgin Creole life cycle was studied by Hall in the 1960s. Creoles share more grammatical similarities with each other than with the languages from which they are phylogenetically derived. However, there is no widely accepted theory that would account for those perceived similarities. Moreover, no grammatical feature has been shown to be specific to Creoles, although it is generally acknowledged that Creoles have simpler and less sophisticated grammar than longer established languages. Many of the Creoles known today arose in the last 500 years, as a result of the worldwide expansion in European maritime power and trade in the Age of Discovery, which led to extensive European colonial empires and an intense slave trade. Like most non-official and minority languages, Creoles have generally been regarded as degenerate variants or dialects of their parent languages. Because of that prejudice, many of the Creoles that arose in the European colonies have become extinct. However, political and academic changes in recent decades have improved the status of Creoles, both as living languages and as object of linguistic study. Some Creoles have even been granted the status of official or semi-official language. Linguists now recognize that Creole formation is a universal phenomenon, not limited to the European colonial period, and an important aspect of language evolution. For example, in 1933 Sigmund Feist postulated a Creole origin for the Germanic languages. Other scholars, such as Salcoco Muffin, argue that pidgins and Creoles arise independently under different circumstances, and that a pidgin need not always precede a Creole nor a Creole evolve from a pidgin. Pidgins, according to Muffin, emerged among trade colonies among users who preserved their native vernaculars for their day-to-day interactions. Creoles, meanwhile, developed in settlement colonies in which speakers of a European language, often indentured servants whose language would be far from the standard in the first place, interacted extensively with non-European slaves, absorbing certain words and features from the slaves' non-European native languages, resulting in a heavily basilectoralized version of the original language. These servants and slaves would come to use the Creole as an everyday vernacular, rather than merely in situations in which contact with the speaker of the superstrate was necessary. History, origin: the English term Creole comes from French cra copyright ol, which is cognate with the Spanish term criollo and Portuguese criollo, all descending from the verb criar, all coming from Latin crea. The specific sense of the term was coined in the 16th and 17th century, during the Great Expansion in European maritime power and trade that led to the establishment of European colonies in other continents. The terms criollo and criollo were originally qualifiers used throughout the Spanish and Portuguese colonies to distinguish the members of an ethnic group who were born and raised locally from those who immigrated as adults. They were most commonly applied to nationals of the colonial power, for example to distinguish Hispar plus or minus Ols Criollos from Hispar plus or minus Ols Peninsulars. However, in Brazil the term was also used to distinguish between Negros Criollos and Negros Africanos. Over time, the term and its derivatives lost the generic meaning and became the proper name of many distinct ethnic groups that developed locally from immigrant communities. Originally, therefore, the term Creole language meant the speech of any of those Creole peoples. Geographic distribution: as a consequence of colonial European trade patterns, most of the known European-based Creole languages arose in the equatorial belt around the world and in areas with access to the oceans, including the coastal regions of the Americas, Western Africa, Goa and along the west coast of India, and along the coast of Southeast Asia up to Indonesia, Singapore, Macau, Hong Kong, the Philippines, Malaysia, Seychelles and Oceania. Many of those Creoles are now extinct, but others still survive in the Caribbean, the north and east coasts of South America, Western Africa, Australia, and in the Indian Ocean. Atlantic Creole languages are based on European languages with elements from African and possibly Amerindian languages. Indian Ocean Creole languages are based on European languages with elements from Malagasy and possibly other Asian languages. There are, however, Creoles like Nubi and Sango that are derived solely from non-European languages. Social and political status. Because of the generally low status of the Creole peoples in the eyes of prior European colonial powers, Creole languages have generally been regarded as degenerate languages, or at best as rudimentary dialects of the politically dominant parent languages. Because of this prejudice, the word Creole was generally used by linguists in opposition to language, rather than as a qualifier for it. This prejudice was compounded by the inherent instability of the colonial system, leading to the disappearance of Creole languages, mainly due to dispersion or assimilation of their speech communities. Another factor that may have contributed to the relative neglect of Creole languages in linguistics is that they do not fit the 19th-century neo-grammarian tree model for the evolution of languages, and its postulated regularity of sound changes. This controversy of the late 19th century profoundly shaped modern approaches to the comparative method in historical linguistics and in Creolistics. Because of social, political, and academic changes brought on by decolonization in the second half of the 20th century, Creole languages have experienced revivals in the past few decades. They are increasingly being used in print and film, and in many cases, their community prestige has improved dramatically. In fact, some have been standardized, and are used in local schools and universities around the world. At the same time, linguists have begun to come to the realization that Creole languages are in no way inferior to other languages. They now use the term Creole, or Creole language for any language suspected to have undergone Creolization, terms that now imply no geographic restrictions nor ethnic prejudices. Classification of Creoles. Historic classification. According to their external history, 4 types of Creoles have been distinguished: plantation Creoles, fort Creoles, maroon Creoles, and Creolized pidgins. By the very nature of a Creole language, the phylogenetic classification of a particular Creole usually is a matter of dispute. Especially when the pidgin precursor and its parent tongues have disappeared before they could be documented. Phylogenetic classification traditionally relies on inheritance of the lexicon, especially of core terms, and of the grammar structure. However, in Creoles, the core lexicon often has mixed origin, and the grammar is largely original. For these reasons, the issue of which language is the parent of a Creole that is, whether a language should be classified as a Portuguese Creole, or English Creole, etc. A often has no definitive answer, and can become the topic of long-lasting controversies, where social prejudices and political considerations may interfere with scientific discussion. Substrate and superstrate. The terms substrate and superstrate are often used when 2 languages interact. However, the meaning of these terms is reasonably well defined only in second language acquisition or language replacement events, when the native speakers of a certain source language are somehow compelled to abandon it for another target language. The outcome of such an event is that erstwhile speakers of the substrate will use some version of the superstrate, at least in more formal contexts. The substrate may survive as a second language for informal conversation. As demonstrated by the fate of many replaced European languages, the influence of the substrate on the official speech is often limited to pronunciation and a modest number of loan words. The substrate might even disappear altogether without leaving any trace. However, there is dispute over the extent to which the terms substrate and superstrate are applicable to the genesis or the description of Creole languages. The language replacement model may not be appropriate in Creole formation contexts, where the emerging language is derived from multiple languages without any one of them being imposed as a replacement for any other. The substratum-superstratum distinction becomes awkward when multiple superstrata must be assumed, when the substratum cannot be identified, or when the presence or the survival of substratal evidence is inferred from mere typological analogies. On the other hand, the distinction may be meaningful when the contributions of each parent language to the resulting Creole can be shown to be very unequal, in a scientifically meaningful way. In the literature on Atlantic Creoles, superstrate usually means European and substrate non-European or African. Decreolization: since Creole languages rarely attain official status, the speakers of a fully formed Creole may eventually feel compelled to conform their speech to one of the parent languages. This decreolization process typically brings about a post-Creole speech continuum characterized by large-scale variation and hypercorrection in the language. It is generally acknowledged that Creoles have a simpler grammar and more internal variability than older, more established languages. However, these notions are occasionally challenged. Phylogenetic or typological comparisons of Creole languages have led to divergent conclusions. Similarities are usually higher among Creoles derived from related languages, such as the languages of Europe, than among broader groups that include also Creoles based on non-Indo-European languages. French-based Creoles in turn are more similar to each other than to other European-based Creoles. It was observed, in particular, that definite articles are mostly prenominal in English-based Creole languages and English, whereas they are generally postnominal in French Creoles. Moreover, the European languages which gave rise to the Creole languages of European colonies all belong to the same subgroup of Western Indo-European and have highly convergent grammars, to the point that Worf joined them into a single standard average European language group. French and English are particularly close, since English, through extensive borrowing, is typologically closer to French than to other Germanic languages. Thus the claimed similarities between Creoles may be mere consequences of similar parentage, rather than characteristic features of all Creoles. Creole Genesis: there are a variety of theories on the origin of Creole languages, all of which attempt to explain the similarities among them. Arenes, Muskin and Smith outline a fourfold classification of explanations regarding Creole Genesis: theories focusing on European input, theories focusing on non-European input, gradualist and developmental hypotheses, universalist approaches, theories focusing on European input, the monogenetic theory of pidgins and Creoles. The monogenetic theory of pidgins and Creoles hypothesizes that they are all derived from a single Mediterranean lingua franca, via a West African pidgin Portuguese of the 17th century, relixified in the so-called slave factories of Western Africa that were the source of the Atlantic slave trade. This theory was originally formulated by Hugo Chachat in the late 19th century and popularized in the late 1950s and early 1960s by Taylor, Wynnum, Thompson, and Stewart. However, this hypothesis is no longer actively investigated. The domestic origin hypothesis, proposed by Hancock for the origin of English-based Creoles of the West Indies, the domestic origin hypothesis argues that, towards the end of the 16th century, English-speaking traders began to settle in the Gambia and Sierra Leone rivers as well as in neighboring areas such as the Bullum and Shibro coasts. These settlers intermarried with the local population, leading to mixed populations, and, as a result of this intermarriage, an English pidgin was created. This pidgin was learned by slaves in slave depots, who later on took it to the West Indies and formed one component of the emerging English Creoles. The European dialect origin hypothesis: the French Creoles are the foremost candidates to being the outcome of normal linguistic change, and their Creoleness to be socio-historic in nature and relative to their colonial origin. Within this theoretical framework, a French Creole is a language phylogenetically based on the French language, more specifically on a 17th-century coiner copyright French extant in Paris, the French Atlantic harbors, and the nascent French colonies. Supporters of this hypothesis suggest that the non-Creole French dialects still spoken in many parts of the Americas share mutual descent from this single coiner copyright. These dialects are found in Canada, the Prairies, Louisiana, St. Bartholomew copyright Lemmy, and as isolates in other parts of the Americas. Approaches under this hypothesis are compatible with gradualism in change and models of imperfect language transmission in coiner copyright Genesis. Foreigner talk and baby talk: The foreigner talk hypothesis argues that a pidgin or Creole language forms when native speakers attempt to simplify their language in order to address speakers who do not know their language at all. Because of the similarities found in this type of speech and speech directed to a small child, it is also sometimes called baby talk. Areens, Muskin and Smith suggest that 4 different processes are involved in creating foreigner talk: accommodation, imitation, telegraphic condensation, conventions. This could explain why Creole languages have much in common, while avoiding a monogenetic model. However, Annenkamp, in analyzing German foreigner talk, claims that it is too inconsistent and unpredictable to provide any model for language learning. While this simplification of input was supposed to account for Creole's simple grammar, commentators have raised a number of criticisms of this explanation. There are a great many grammatical similarities amongst pidgins and Creoles despite having very different lexifier languages. Grammatical simplification can be explained by other processes, that is the innate grammar of Bickerton's language bioprogram theory. Speakers of a Creole's lexifier language often fail to understand, without learning the language, the grammar of a pidgin or Creole. Pidgins are more often used amongst speakers of different substrate languages than between such speakers and those of the lexifier language. Another problem with the FT explanation is its potential circularity. Bloomfield points out that FT is often based on the imitation of the incorrect speech of the non-natives, that is the pidgin. Therefore one may be mistaken in assuming that the former gave rise to the latter. Imperfect L2 learning. The imperfect L2 learning hypothesis claims that pidgins are primarily the result of the imperfect L2 learning of the dominant lexifier language by the slaves. Research on naturalistic L2 processes has revealed a number of features of interlanguage systems that are also seen in pidgins and Creoles: invariant verb forms derived from the infinitive or the least marked finite verb form. Loss of determiners or use as determiners of demonstrative pronouns, adjectives or adverbs. Placement of a negative particle in preverbal position. Use of adverbs to express modality. Fixed single-word order with no inversion in questions. Reduced or absent nominal plural marking. Imperfect L2 learning is compatible with other approaches, notably the European dialect origin hypothesis and the universalist models of language transmission. Theories focusing on non-European input. Theories focusing on the substrate, or non-European, languages attribute similarities amongst Creoles to the similarities of African substrate languages. These features are often assumed to be transferred from the substrate language to the Creole or to be preserved invariant from the substrate language in the Creole through a process of relexification. The substrate language replaces the native lexical items with lexical material from the superstrate language while retaining the native grammatical categories. The problem with this explanation is that the postulated substrate languages differ amongst themselves and with Creoles in meaningful ways. Bickerton argues that the number and diversity of African languages and the paucity of a historical record on Creole Genesis makes determining lexical correspondence as a matter of chance. Dillard coined the term cafeteria principle to refer to the practice of arbitrarily attributing features of Creoles to the influence of substrate African languages or assorted substandard dialects of European languages. For a representative debate on this issue, see the contributions to Muffin. For a more recent view, Puckville. Because of the socio-historic similarities amongst many of the Creoles, the Atlantic slave trade and the plantation system of the European colonies have been emphasized as factors by linguists such as McHutter. Gradualist and developmental hypotheses. One class of Creoles might start as pidgins, rudimentary second languages improvised for use between speakers of 2 or more non-intelligible native languages. Keith Winham suggests that pidgins need 3 languages to form, with one being clearly dominant over the others. The lexicon of a pidgin is usually small and drawn from the vocabularies of his speakers, in varying proportions. Morphological details like word inflections, which usually take years to learn, are omitted. The syntax is kept very simple, usually based on strict word order. In this initial stage, all aspects of the speech are Eurosyntax, lexicon, and pronunciation are Euro tend to be quite variable, especially with regard to the speaker's background. if a pidgin manages to be learned by the children of a community as a native language, it may become fixed and acquire a more complex grammar, with fixed phonology, syntax, morphology, and syntactic embedding. Pidgins can become full languages in only a single generation. Creolization is the second stage where the pidgin language develops into a fully developed native language. The vocabulary, too, will develop to contain more and more items according to a rationale of lexical enrichment. Universalist approaches. Universalist models stress the intervention of specific general processes during the transmission of language from generation to generation and from speaker to speaker. The process invoked varies, a general tendency towards semantic transparency, first language learning driven by universal process, or general process of discourse organization. The main universalist theory is still Bickerton's language bioprogram theory, proposed in the 1980s. Bickerton claims that Creoles are inventions of the children growing up on newly founded plantations. Around them, they only heard pidgins spoken, without enough structure to function as natural languages. And the children used their own innate linguistic capacities to transform the pidgin input into a full-fledged language. The alleged common features of all Creoles would then be the consequence of those innate abilities being universal. Recent study, the last decade, has seen the emergence of some new questions about the nature of Creoles, in particular, the question of how complex Creoles are and the question of whether Creoles are indeed exceptional languages. The Creole Prototype, some features that distinguish Creole languages from non-Creoles have been proposed. John McHutter has proposed the following list of features to indicate a Creole prototype: a lack of inflectional morphology, a lack of tone on monosyllabic words, and a lack of semantically opaque word formation. McHutter hypothesizes that these three properties exactly characterize a Creole. However, the Creole prototype hypothesis has been disputed. Henri Whitman and David Gill argue that languages such as Manding, Seninc, Mago or French and Real Indonesian have all these three features but show none of the socio-historic traits of Creole languages. Others have demonstrated Creoles that serve as counterexamples to McHutter's hypothesis the existence of inflectional morphology in verbized Dutch Creole, for example, or tone in Pape Menchu. Exceptionalism. Building up on this discussion, McHutter proposed that the world's simplest grammars are Creole grammars, claiming that every non-Creole language's grammar is at least as complex as any Creole language's grammar. Gill has replied that Real Indonesian has a simpler grammar than Saramaccan, the language McHutter uses as a showcase for his theory. The same objections were raised by Whitman in his 1999 debate with McHutter. The lack of progress made in defining Creoles in terms of their morphology and syntax has led scholars such as Robert Chaudenson, Sal Coco Muffin, Michel de Graaf, and Henri Whitman to question the value of Creole as a typological class. They argue that Creoles are structurally no different from any other language, and that Creole is a socio-historic concept not a linguistic one encompassing displaced populations and slavery. Thomason and Kaufman spell out the idea of Creole exceptionalism, claiming that Creole languages are an instance of non-genetic language change due to language shift with abnormal transmission. Gradualists question the abnormal transmission of languages in a Creole setting and argue that the processes which created today's Creole languages are no different from universal patterns of language change. Given these objections to Creole as a concept, articles such as Against Creole Exceptionalism by de Graaf and texts like Deconstructing Creole by Ansaldo and Matthews have arisen which question the idea that Creoles are exceptional in any meaningful way. Additionally, Muffin argues that some Romance languages are potential Creoles but that they are not considered as such by linguists because of a historical bias against such a view. See also, Creolistics, Dialect, Diglossia, Gradualism, Language Change, Language Contact, Lingua Franca, Mixed Language, Koine Language, Nation Language, Nicaraguan Sign Language, Relixification, Substratum, Creoles by Main Parent Language, Arabic-based Creole languages, Assamese-based, Nagamese, Chinese-based, Tangwang, Dutch-based Creole languages, English-based Creole languages, French-based Creole languages, German-based, Unsiyuj, Hindi-based, Andaman Creole Hindi, Congo-based, Kaituba, Malay-based Creole languages, Mkbandi-based, Sango, Portuguese-based Creole languages, Spanish-based Creole languages, Sinhala-based, Vedra language. References. Publications: Anderson, Roger W., ed., Pidginization and Creolization as Language Acquisition, Rowley, Massachusetts, Newberry Hoosier, and Soldo, U. Matthews, S., Deconstructing Creole, The Rationale, Typological Studies in Language 73, 1 Euro 20, doi, 10.1075/TSL. 73.02 ANS, ISNA 0167-7373, Areens, Jack. Muskin, Peter. Smith, Novel, Pidgins and Creoles, An Introduction, Amsterdam, Benjamins, ISBN A90-272-5236 AB, Areens, Jack, Syntactic Developments in Sranan, Creolization as a Gradual Process, Nijmegen, ISBN A90-90268-3-5. Bailey, Charles J. Maralt, Carl, The French Lineage of English, in Meisel, Jar 1/4 Gen, Langsen Contact a Euro Pidgins a Euro Creoles, Tar 1/4 Bingen, Now, pp. 21 a Euro 53 Bickerton, Derek, Bastard Tongues, A Trailblazing Linguist Finds Clues to Our Common Humanity in the World's Lowliest Languages, Macmillan, ISBN A978-0-8090-2816-0. Bickerton, Derek, Roots of Language, Koroma Publishers, ISBN A0-89720-044-6. Bickerton, Derek, Creole Languages, Scientific American. 249, 116 a Euro 122, doi, 10.1038/Scientific American 0783-116. Bickerton, Derek, The Language Bioprogram Hypothesis, The Behavioral and Brain Sciences 7, 173 a Euro 188, doi, 10.1017 per second 0140525x0004449. Bloomfield, L., Language, New York, Henry Holder, DeCamp, David, The Development of Pidgin and Creole Studies, in Waldman, Albert, Pidgin and Creole Linguistics, Bloomington, Indiana University Press, ppA 3 a Euro 20. De Graaf, Michel, On the Origin of Creoles, A Cartesian Critique of Neo-Darwinian Linguistics, Linguistic Typology 5, 213 a Euro 310. De Graaf, Michel, Relixification, A Re-evaluation, Linguistic Anthropology 44, 321 a Euro 414. De Graaf, Michel, Against Creole Exceptionalism, Language 79, 391 a Euro 410, doi, 10.1353/LAN. 2003.0114. Dillard, J.L., Principles in the History of American English, Paradox, Virginity, and Cafeteria, Florida Foreign Language Reporter 8, 32 a Euro 33. Ekramer, Eva, How to Pave the Way for the Emancipation of a Creole Language. Pape Menchu, or What Can a Literature Do for Its Language? In Hoogbergen, Wim, Born Out of Resistance. On Caribbean Cultural Creativity, Utrecht, Isa Publications. Feist, Sigmund, The Origin of the Germanic Languages and the Europeanization of North Europe, Language 8, 245 a Euro 254, doi, 10.2307/408831, JSTORA 408831. Ferguson, C.A., Absence of Copula and the Notion of Simplicity, A Study of Normal Speech, Baby Talk, Foreigner Talk and Pidgins. In Himes, D., Pidginization and Creolization of Languages, Cambridge, Cambridge University Press. Fournier, Robert. Whitman, Henri, eds. Le Frena Section A's des Armes Copyright Rix, Trois-Rivières, Presses Universitaires de Trois-Rivières, ISBN A2-9802307-2-3. Fournier, Robert, des Cra copyright Olisms dans la distribution des dar copyright terminants et des complet copyright mentors en frena section as que copyright bar copyright qua bas elector, in Patrice Brosseur, frena section as dharma copyright Rick, variation, Cra copyrightalization, normalization, Université copyright Davignon, Centre des copyright Tudes Canadiennes, PPA 217 € 228 Gieslin. Kimberly L. Semantic transparency as a predictor of copular choice in second language acquisition, Linguistics 40, 439 € 468, doi, 10.1515/ling. 2002.019 Gill, David, Creoles, Complexity and Reo-Indonesian, Linguistic Typology 5, 325 € 371 Good, Jeff, Tone and Accent in Saramaccan, Charting a Deep Split in the Phonology of a Language, Lingua 114, 575 € 619, doi, 10.1016 per second 0024-3841, 03, 00062-7 Hall, Robert A., Pidgin and Creole Languages, Ithaca, Cornell University, Hall, Robert A. External History of the Romance Languages, New York, American Elsevier Publishing Compania, Hamilton, A. Chris. Coolett, H. Branch, Role of Inflectional Regularity and Semantic Transparency in Reading Morphologically Complex Words, Evidence from Acquired Dyslexia, Neuricus 14, 347 € 368, doi, 10.1080/13554790802368679 Hancock, Ian F., The Domestic Hypothesis, Diffusion and Componentiality, An Account of Anglophone Creole Origins, in Peter Muskin. Norval Smith, Substrata vs. Universals in Creole Genesis, Amsterdam, Benjamins, ppA 71 € 100 Enenkamp, B. Eyewitnessing Pidginization, Structural and Sociolinguistic Aspects of German and Turkish Foreigner Talk, in Seba, M. Todd, L. Papers from the York Creole Conference, September 24 € 27, 1983, York Papers in Linguistics Home, John, Pidgins and Creoles 1, Cambridge, Cambridge University Press Home, John, Pidgins and Creoles 2, Cambridge, Cambridge University Press Hunter Smith, Norval Selby, The Genesis of the Creole Languages of Suriname, Amsterdam, Hymes, D.H., Pidginization and Creolization of Languages, Cambridge University Press Jungmann, Fra Copyright Derek H. La Teoria del Substrato y los Dialectos Hispano-Romances y Gascons, Madrid, Lefebvre, Claire, The Emergence of Productive Morphology in Creole Languages, The Case of Haitian Creole, Yearbook of Morphology, 35 € 80, Martinet, Andrew Copyright, A Permilconomie des Changements Phonocopyrightiques, Traiter Copyright de Phonologie Diachronique, Bern, Frank A., McHutter, John H., Identifying the Creole Prototype, Vindicating a Typological Class, Language 74, 788 € 818, doi, 10.2307/417003, JSTORA 417003, McHutter, John H., The Aphogenesis Hypothesis of Plantation Creole Origin, in Huber, M. Puckville, M., Spreading the Word, The Issue of Diffusion Among the Atlantic Creoles, London, University of Westminster Press, McHutter, John H., Defining Creole, Oxford, Oxford University Press, Muger, GUUS. Muskin, Peter, On the Beginnings of Pidgin and Creole Studies, Schuchart and Hessling, in Waldman, Albert, Pidgin and Creole Linguistics, Bloomington, Indiana University Press, ppA 21 € 45, Meisel, Jar 1/4 GEN, Langsen Contact € Pidgins € Creoles, Tar 1/4 Bingen, Nara, Muffin, Salcoco, ed., Africanisms in Afro-American Language Varieties, Athens, University of Georgia Press, Muffin, Salcoco, Creolization as a Social, Not a Structural, Process, in Newman Holscrew, Ingrid. Schneider, Edgar, Degrees of Restructuring in Creole Languages, Amsterdam, John Benjamins, ppA 65 Euro 84, Muffin, Salcoco, The Ecology of Language Evolution, Cambridge, Cambridge University Press, Muskin, Peter. Law, Paul, Creole Studies, A Theoretical Linguist, Euro Unregistered Trademark S Field Guide, GLOT International 5, 47 Euro 57 Puckville, Michael, Out of Africa, African Influences in Atlantic Creoles, London, Batley Brigea, Schumann, John H., The Pidginization Process, A Model for Second Language Acquisition, Rowley, Massachusetts, Newbury Hosier, Seba, Mark, Contact Languages, Pidgins and Creoles, Macmillan, ISBN A0-333-63024-6, Ciaran, Peter A. M. Wecker, Herman C., Semantic Transparency as a Factor in Creole Genesis. In Muskin, Peter. Smith, Novel, Substrata vs. Universals in Creole Genesis, Amsterdam, Benjamins, ppA 57 Euro 70 singular, John Victor, The Influence of African Languages on Pidgins and Creoles, in K. Jonathan. Koopman, H. Sportish, D.A.L., Current Approaches to African Linguistics 2, Dordrecht, Forres, ppA 65 Euro 77, ISBN A90-70176-95-5, singular, John Victor, The Homogeneity of the Substrate as a Factor in Pidgin Creole Genesis. Language 64, 27 Euro 51, doi, 10.2307/414784, JSTORA 414784, singular, John Victor, Theories of Creole Genesis, Socio-Historical Considerations, and the Evaluation of Evidence, The Case of Haitian Creole and the Relixification Hypothesis, Journal of Pidgin and Creole Languages 11, 185 Euro 230, doi, 10.1075/JPCL 11.2.02 Shiner, Stewart, William A., Creole Languages in the Caribbean, in F.A. Rice, Study of the Role of Second Languages, Washington, D.C. Center for Applied Linguistics, ppA 34 Euro 53, Taylor, Douglas, Languages in the West Indies, Baltimore, Johns Hopkins University Press, Thomason, Sarah. Kaufman, Terence, Language Contact, Creolization, and Genetic Linguistics, Berkeley, University of California Press, Thompson, R.W., A Note on Some Possible Affinities Between the Creole Dialects of the Old World and Those of the New, Creole Language Studies 2, 107 Euro 113, Traugott, Elizabeth Kloss, The Development of Pidgin and Creole Studies, in Waldman, Theo, Pidgin and Creole Linguistics, Bloomington, Indiana University Press, ppA 70 Euro 98, Venleman, Theo, Languages in Prehistoric Europe North of the Alps, in Bemesberger, Alfred. Venleman, Theo, Languages in Prehistoric Europe, Heidelberg, C. Winter, ppA 319 Euro 332 Ward-Hoare, Ronald, Pidgins and Creoles, An Introduction to Sociolinguistics, Blackwell Publishing, ppA 57 Euro 86 Winford, D., Creole Formation in the Context of Contact Languages, Journal of Pidgin and Creole Language 12, 131 Euro 151, doi, 10.1075/JPCL 12.1.06 Weiner, Weinreich, Uriel, 1953, Languages in Contact, Findings and Problems, New York, Mouton Publishers, ISBN A. 978-90-279-2689-0. Winham, Keith, Spanish Contact Vernaculars in the Philippine Islands, Hong Konga, Winham, Keith, The Origin of the European-Based Creoles and Pidgins, Orbis 14, 509 Euro 27 Whitman, Henri, Les Rares Copyright Actions en cours Registered Trademark Ni en Morphologie Diachronique, Actes du colloque de la Socia Copyright Tar Copyright International de Linguistique Fonctionnelle 10, 285 Euro 92 Whitman, Henri, Grammaica para copyright e desvaria copyright tar copyright s colonials du frana section. As populaire de Paris du 17 e circa origins du frana section as que copyright bar copyright qua, Infornia, Robert. Whitman, Henri, Le frana section as des armes copyright Rix, Trois-Rivières, Presses universitaires de Trois-Rivières, ppA 281 Euro 334, Whitman, Henri, Le frana section as de Paris dans le frana section as des armes copyright Rix, Proceedings of the International Congress of Linguists 16 Whitman, Henri. Prototype as a typological yardstick to Creoleness. The Creolist Archives Papers Online, Stockholm's Universitet. 2, Whitman, Henri. Lexical Diffusion and the Glottogenetics of Creole French. Creolist Debate, Parts I-6, Appendixes 1-9. The Linguist List, Eastern Michigan University Wayne State University, Whorf, Benjamin, John Carroll, ed., Language, Thought, and Reality, Selected Writings of Benjamin Lee Whorf, Cambridge, MIT Presser, External links, Louisiana Creole Dictionary, Society for Pidgin and Creole Linguistics, Creole Magazine Discover the Creole Culture, Association for Portuguese and Spanish Lexically Based Creoles, Language Varieties website. Groupe Europa Copyright en de recherches en langues cra copyright ols, Groupe d'études de recherche en espace cra copyright olophone, Associa Picavolt Pound o Brasileira de Estudos Criollos e Similars, Society for Caribbean Linguistics, The Online Dictionary of Language Terminology, Answer.com. Definition Creoles.